Hello, boys and girls of Credit Union Land, and welcome to the 12th episode of the CUInsight Experience. My name is Randy Smith. I am one of the co-founders and the publisher of CUInsight.com, and it is my job on the show to have conversations with the best and the brightest from around the credit union community. I get to pick their brains and hopefully find a few nuggets that we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is Miss Tracie Kenyon. She is the president of Montana's credit unions, also the board chair currently of Filene, and on the board of Western CUNA Management School. I'm telling you, she is everywhere. Our paths have crossed many times over the years, but I was really excited just to get that chance to have a longer conversation and get to know Tracie a little bit better. We talked about a lot on this episode, why she loves the simplicity of the credit union model and its inherent goodness, and yet also loves change. We also talked about the DE program. You can't get two of us together and not talk about that. Both of us, discussed why we feel it's so transformational, whether you're new to the credit union movement or a lifelong veteran. She shared how as a leader, she helps people who may not share those same beliefs about change, let's say change adverse, and not only work through change, but thrive in that environment. There was so many great leadership nuggets in this episode. As always, we wrap it up with the rapid fire questions. I wish you could have seen the reaction on Tracie's face to the phrase, "That's the way we've always done it." This was a blast. I loved getting to know Tracie better. I hope you enjoy it as well. So without further ado, I give you my conversation with Miss Tracie Kenyon. Enjoy. Tracie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I was so looking forward to this conversation. We've met a lot, but it always seems like it's in passing. So I was actually looking forward to having a long conversation with you. So thank you for joining me today.
Well, Randy, thank you so much for the opportunity. Right back at you. I can't wait to have a long conversation with you as well.
I think it's going to be a blast. So let's just jump right into the questions. From previous conversations, I know you've talked about embracing the simplicity of the credit union model and its inherent goodness. Can you explain to our listeners more what you mean by that?
Sure. I don't mean at all that credit unions are not complex. Credit unions are extremely complex, and the products and services that we offer and the payment systems and all of that. But what is simple is our model, our structure. The fact that a group of people get together to pool their resources, to help each other out. After 34 years, I still get emotional about it. It's such a cool concept. And it really is good. There's nothing bad about cooperation. There's nothing bad about people working together just to make sure that everybody's boat rises, as they say. So that's what I mean by the simplicity. It's the simplicity of the model, not necessarily the simplicity of a credit union or its individual offerings. The other piece that I find really amazing and unique and exciting is the fact that real members sit at the table and they govern their credit union and they make decisions based on what's best for credit union members and not necessarily what's best for the bottom line. And I have seen that over and over and over where they will debate. A board will debate. They'll come together with these diverse viewpoints and debate on what may seem like a small thing, but it really is big because it's impactful to members, and they're being responsible and responsive to their individual members' needs. So that's what I mean by that.
I love that. Is there something that you've done over your career as a leader to, like when you bring somebody new into the Montana Credit Union Network, to educate them on the credit union difference? Because, there is a big difference in it. I'm sure it like gets under your skin when you hear somebody go, they're just like banks, because there's such a difference.
Yeah, right. Oh, that I just made a face.
Yeah.
And the podcast, they're not going to see my face when I hear that we're just like banks. We're so not like banks. We may offer similar products and services, but our structure is so different and so unique. And so that's one of the things that I always want to make sure that folks understand when they come to work for Montana's credit unions is that our structure is different, and decisions are not based on products and services that we offer. They're not based on the geographic nature or non-geographic nature, really even who we serve. It's really about the structure of credit unions being not-for-profit financial cooperatives owned by their depositors and governed by volunteer boards of directors. And that's really, I guess, if you would say, that's my elevator speech. And I want to make sure that my team fully understands that and embraces it.
I know that you and I are both big DE supporters, and you had mentioned to me previously that your entire staff will have gone through the DE program by the end of the year. So that's an amazing accomplishment. Why is DE so important to you personally, as well as making sure that that's something that your staff experiences as well?
Well, first of all, shout out to October 1998, best class ever.
Oh, yeah.
So I had the opportunity to go through DE about 14 years into my credit union experience, and it really reignited a flame for me about credit unions and the credit union difference. I think sometimes it's easy for us to slog through our daily grind and just, we're just kind of doing it and maybe forget about what makes credit unions unique. And so I think that at the state level and at our, in an individual organization level, we can certainly provide a lot of great examples about credit union difference, and we can talk about it. But it isn't until folks, or oftentimes I should say, it isn't until they get into a group with diverse credit union lovers from across not just the country, but the globe. And they get an opportunity to interact with people. And one of the things in the DE experience, one of the things that I love about DE is that you don't know people's titles. You may know where they come from. You may know what state they're from, but you don't know their titles. And in fact, I can't even remember, it's been so long ago for me, but it seems like people don't even know what organization necessarily you work with. And so you can have literally our last two presidents of CUNA have gone through DE, and people can not know that, they could be sitting next to a member service rep, from Nebraska or something. And I love that. It's such an equalizer. And I think it inspires people to do wonderful things in their community, and also to understand that there are a lot of really amazing activities going on and amazing commitment to the credit union ideal that going on at the national, international level that they may not have been aware. So I really send folks to, and to use a phrase that we're using a lot right now, but to open their eyes to credit unions and to our simple idea of people helping people.
I've told this story on the podcast before that in my class, unbeknownst to anybody in the class, at two separate groups, one was a father, 30 years in, credit union CEO, and his son, who was fairly new into the credit union system a year or two in, was at another table. And the experience that they both had, one is, kind of opening your eyes to the credit unions, to use the marketing phrase, but the other to the CEO after 30 years, I mean, he literally broke down in tears at the end, talking about how it was what he needed, like he did, just the feelings of why he's been doing this for so long. So to see that, at the end, when you kind of all come together and actually figure out who everybody is, it was such a,
right.
Like that one to me, not only the personal effect it had on me, but to see that where it was just the two polar opposite sides of it, like just starting and, having that experience and how it affected everybody. So yeah, I'm with you. It's an amazing thing we're trying to You motivate me. We're trying to get everybody at CUInsight through as well. So it's
Oh, good. I can tell you too, when my team comes back, they also have this unique connection with people outside of Montana that they keep up with. One of our recent graduates has a text group, for example, that she and her group, they send text to each other. I'm not sure if it's on a daily basis, but it's very frequent. And that's really, really cool because it gives them another opportunity for problem solving, for idea generation, and all the kinds of things that really can help make your work experience exciting.
Absolutely. And growing that network, like I said, we were both recently at GAC, and I always think it's funny. You see somebody from your class and it's almost like you drop everything and beeline to go see them. So there's that connection, right? So it never stops. And then there's 2 or 3 of you standing around talking and laughing and that shared experience. So in a previous episode, Jill mentioned that when she was on the podcast, the advice you gave her when she was fresh out of college. So that idea that do it anyways and let the chips fall where they may. I'm a believer in change. I believe it's constant. I actually love it. But from talking to Jill, I got that impression that you're a big fan of change as well. Like, why is mixing things up important to you?
Well, on a personal note, I think it's what keeps us young and vibrant and interesting for sure. On a professional note, I suppose that's the same thing. It keeps us vibrant and interesting and always looking for new and better ways to do things. I have caught staff members describing our organization as fluid and dynamic. And I teased that particular person and I said, I think that's your way of saying, hey, that chick likes to mix it up. And that's really, I think, how I see myself. I do like to mix it up, not for change's sake. There are plenty of things that we do here because we need to do them, because they have to get done. Let's be honest. I don't change up how I do my bond renewal every year. I don't change up how bills get paid. It's not like, ooh, this month we're gonna pay everybody late just to see what happens. But for the things that we can look at and make even incremental changes to, we really try to. And I think that's the culture. I hope that's the culture, but I believe it is that we built here. I know that that my team is always looking for new, fun, innovative ways to do things, really to surprise and engage our membership.
I love it. My team's probably like, yeah, we get that. This podcast, for example, the day before the podcast, it was supposed to be a video interview thing. And that's what Jim Nussel thought he was agreeing to, being the first guest. And then I was like, hey, Jim, it's just a podcast. And my team was like, what? We have a podcast? So it has worked. I love it. So we're having so much fun. Do you have any advice for someone? A lot of people out there, change scares them. Is there advice that you have, or if you have change resistant, say, team members, is there some way that you help them handle change?
Absolutely. In terms of helping people manage change, I like to help them understand that really there are 3 different types of change. There's, transitional change, there's developmental change, and then there's transformational change. And transitional change is really, just like incremental stuff. We go every year to the beach for vacation. Are we going to rent the same cabin that we rent? Or if we get a chance to get a cabin that's closer, are we going to take the cabin that's closer? And kind of talk about, what does that mean? Developmental change is, hey, rather than going to the beach, we get a chance to go to Disneyland. Would we consider Disneyland over? And then, transformational changes. Guess what? We're going on the Magical Mystery Tour. We don't even know we're going, but we're going on vacation. You could be going to dig ditches in Antarctica. You could be going to lay on the beach in Rio, So it really is about sort of understanding that not every change is massive. There are some just sort of little incremental changes. And I think as people get more comfortable with the notion and the culture of change, it becomes less frightening. It's when we have, those sacred cows that never get butchered. We have that stuff that we never talk about, and in the trade association world, oftentimes, or at least when I came here, that was dues and governance. we just don't talk about those things. We just, the due structure is set. We just don't talk about it. The governance structure is set. We just don't talk about it. And thankfully, my board, over many years discussion and of changing, understands and it's part of our board culture to talk about those things, make sure that they're working, and they're no longer sacred cows. It's just part of what we do for business. So I think, again, sort of maybe bringing down some of those really scary things, talking about it and understanding that not every change is huge. Some changes are teeny.
Yep, that's true. If we were doing a video, I'd love to see what your reaction would be to the phrase, "That's what we've always done here."
Ay. So here's what I can answer to that with regard to this organization. I am now the longest serving employee in this organization. So if anybody even tried that, I'd be like, huh? What? Really? I don't remember that. But you certainly hear, well, that's what we did last year, or that's what we did with regard to this meeting or that meeting or this, this event. And at that point, we can say, well, maybe it's time to delight our members and do something different. And the good thing is for us, so with regard to like events and that kind of thing, our members are pretty used to us mixing it up. And I think they look forward to it. And so we have really open dialogue around the office about, that's what we've always done. And okay, so if that's what we've always done, does that mean it's because it's the best practice? Is that because it's the highest and best thing? Or is that because we're in a terrible rut, or we're not very creative and we can't really figure out anything else? So, it really is to me about continual conversation and making sure that we've got the best product coming out of this organization and that each individual is being used to their best and highest capacity.
Absolutely. On a previous episode, Sam Paxton was talking about the Co-op Think conference, and she was mentioning like that perfect moment when she looked up on stage and saw something. And I was like, so do you try to recreate that? And she was like, absolutely not. She's like, it's got to be something new. So I love the change agents, right? I want to move forward into kind of the leadership and life hacks portion of the episode. You just mentioned you're the longest serving employee at the league. What inspired you to take the gig as president and CEO of the Montana Credit Union Network in 2001?
Oh, boy. Well, I was working for Utah's credit unions under the leadership of Scott Earl. I was senior vice president there over the advocacy role. And, if you know credit union history, that's about the same time. I mean, I was there during HR 1151 and also the beginning, really, of the terrible state banker battle attacks in Utah. And the opportunity to come to Montana sort of immediately following, and some would say maybe in the middle of some of that banker battle, was for me, I felt like a chance to come to a state that had not yet seen some of that ugliness and to really Teflon coat. I mean, I actually used that term when I was interviewing. Somebody asked me, one of the board members asked if they were hiring a little warlord. I mean, that was exactly what, are you coming up to start banker battles? And I said, I would be happy if I never had to go into, that sort of battle again. Now, if I do, I'm ready.
Yep.
But what I'd really like to do is come and help Teflon coat Montana's credit unions so that when those kinds of attacks come, they just sort of roll off of you. And so that's really been my mission. That's been my goal. And that was one of the things that I think inspired me to come here to Montana.
I have more questions now. I want to, just to stick with that, I'd like to ask, how has that inspiration changed with time on the job?
I'm not sure that inspiration has necessarily changed. I still believe that very, very strongly that's one of our major roles. And actually my DE project was to start a development corporation that does just that, outreach and development through credit unions for economic improvement for low wealth and underserved Montanans. And so we created Montana Credit Unions for Community Development in about 2002, I think, 2003, maybe we did our incorporation. We're a 501c3. And we have done everything from volunteer income tax assistance to matched education, savings accounts, other matched accounts, matched IDAs, individual development accounts, some for survivors of domestic abuse. We've done some for folks who've been displaced, in rural workers who were displaced. Everything has a financial education bent to it. So we do reality fairs. We also do retirement fairs. So we're very engaged with our credit unions, helping to improve the economic and social well-being of Montanans. So that's a little bit of that. But then what other inspiration? For me, the inspiration also to continue doing what I'm doing is the relationships. I am definitely a relationship person. I love my credit unions. I love the CEOs. I love the employees. I love the volunteers. I am really blessed to tell you that I work with an amazing constituency and that I can truly look you in the eye. And I promise you, I would not look to the left. Isn't that what they say? When you're going to lie, you're going to look to the left.
Okay.
Right. I truly love every single one of them. And I feel engaged in their lives, in their personal lives, in their work lives. And I really want our organization to help their organization make a difference in the lives of their members, but also in whatever we can do to help make their lives easier. I mean, that's our role. That's our role, is to be a support. We work for credit unions. I work for every single person who is part of an official family of a credit union, and frankly, every credit union member in the state of Montana.
I'd like to kind of take a step back there. It sounds like when you started the development program, you were fairly new in Montana. Was that about a year after you started? Or so from let's call it a new leader in the organization standpoint, how did you get that current board or that board at that time to buy in to your vision?
I guess I can be fairly persuasive. And I'm also extremely energetic. But, that said, I did research. So definitely research based. We knew that there was a need. We knew that people were hurting in Montana. We'd done a survey. We knew what people thought about credit unions, knew about credit unions, but we also had a good sense of what they didn't know. And one of the things that we did on purpose is that we branded the organization Montana's Credit Unions for Community Development, so that when we use that term in the marketplace, that it was all encompassing. So even if I had a credit union in a particular market that wasn't involved, if we had a program that was coming to them from Montana's Credit Unions for Community Development, how could you argue with that? So it's always been, for me, about raising the impact of credit unions, raising the awareness of credit unions. And then again, going back to, it's twofold. There's the Teflon coating that I talked about. Yep. So we create all of these great stories. And credit unions, by the way, were doing a lot of this. So we were able to capture it also. So we were able to have now a vehicle to capture and to help and to support the great work that they were doing. I don't want to say that Montana's credit unions weren't doing any of this sort of thing. They were. We just created an opportunity to aggregate resources and sort of a conduit. So, we've got the Teflon coating, but then frankly, we've got the social mission work that is so near and dear to my heart. So it has always had a two-pronged approach. It is the opportunity for credit unions to get into their communities, really make a difference in the lives of members, and generate stories that I can go and advocate on their behalf for. So there was, like I said, it was kind of always that two-pronged approach. And my board, they understood it and they liked it, and they still like it and support it and understand it. And I think it's reasonable to say that every one of our credit unions is engaged at some level, at some point with, we internally call it MCUCD, but with Montana's Credit Unions for Community Development. So we have broad support and still a lot of excitement and engagement. And MCUCD is evolving. So we have sunsetted programs that either we can't do as well as other organizations can, or if we find that we try them and maybe they aren't the right fit for our credit unions, we'll try something new. And so, we're always evolving the organization.
Something you just said there at the end of that is, I think, maybe an important follow-up question here for young leaders. How do you have a way of deciding where you're like, that's just not in our wheelhouse. We need to stop doing that or let somebody else do it. It's a tough thing to walk away from a project you start sometimes. Any tips there for a young leader?
Well, number one, it's really tough because you get into that, a little bit of that, what we just talked about. That's the way we've always done it. Well, that was why we started this organization. How can we not do? Well, good example is volunteer income tax assistance. We were heavily involved in the VITA program for years. We had staff that were engaged in the VITA program. And we took a good look at it and we started to see that our credit unions were moving away from the program. It just didn't work for them for whatever reason. So, in between tax seasons, we'd have conversations with them and find out. And we found out that it's just too labor intensive. They weren't getting the members or even non-members coming in. And then what we really found was that in our market, AARP was doing an awesome job. And so what we did was that we took a couple of years to off-ramp, and we then started to work directly with AARP and sort of transition our program to them. There's no reason for us to expend our resources, and they're really not our resources. And honestly, I could say they're the credit union's resources entrusted to us, but at the end of the day, Randy, they're members' resources. So I'm very cognizant of the fact if we can't do it best, well, let's find someone and partner with them who can do it best. And then what that does is it frees us up to try other things. So we're heavily invested in matched education savings accounts right now. Like I said earlier, individual development accounts where we have folks that might not be able to attend college, juniors, seniors, and really some non-traditional students. And the whole point is that they agree to regular savings, and then they get a match at the end to go to college. We do not provide the match. We work with federal agencies, and we also work with every state institution and even the private institutions with their foundations to create those matches. What credit unions offer in this program is they hold the accounts. We have the software, and so we do the back office processing so that when a member receives their account, it shows how much they've deposited, what match they've earned. And so that's what MCUCD does. And then MCUCD also provides the educational resources to the credit union. So the credit unions provide financial education. And obviously the thought is to help people get into a savings habit, and then also to help them attain an asset. We're about asset building. So there you go.
That is an awesome program. It sounds like you guys have there. That's very cool. Have you, over your time in credit unions, is there a big change that you've noticed, whether in Montana or across the board?
Wow. In 34 years, I would be lying to tell you that no changes at all. Everything's the same. And there have been lots and lots and lots of changes. I believe that credit unions are far more engaged in advocacy and politically active than they were when I started. Although my first credit union in Tacoma, Washington, the CEO was the chair of the league board. I didn't even know what that meant, except that I was asked to write a letter, "Don't tax my credit union." So I probably wrote my first "Don't tax my credit union" letter in about 1985. And so, some of those battles have been going on for a lot of years. I would say that HR 1151 in 1998 really did wake up credit unions to the need for political advocacy. And so I think that's been a massive change. I think we see more competition between credit unions than we used to. That's a change. I don't think I have to, editorialize on that. I don't know if it's good or bad. It's a change. I believe that we are seeing a lot of collaboration on some big ticket items that maybe it's not change, but maybe it's like a boomerang. I believe that we collaborated, and I wasn't around, although my child would like you to believe that I was in the 30s, but I wasn't. But I think, we were built on that collaboration. We were built on working together. And as we started to grow up, we sort of moved away from some of that. And I think now, blockchain is a perfect example of credit unions and system providers working together. I believe that at the state level, at the league level, even at the national level, that we're seeing a lot of great collaboration and cooperation for solving individual problems. I mentioned Open Your Eyes. That's a fabulous example of a problem, if you will, that we've been trying to solve for some time. And it looks like we are at a point farther along than we've ever been to actually start raising awareness on a national level about, the credit union ideals.
Is there a belief held by credit unions currently that you think will have to significantly change in the foreseeable future?
Oh, wow. I think one of the things that I hear is that only large credit unions can survive. We hear that a lot. We hear that, and not just from CEOs of large credit unions. I hear that from vendors. I hear that from partners. I just hear it everywhere. And I really do not believe I don't believe that's accurate. I believe that credit unions that will, and it isn't just about surviving for me, it's about thriving. I believe that credit unions with engaged and innovative leadership, doesn't matter what size they are, if they're serving their members and they're constantly innovating, I believe that they will survive and thrive. And I think that's something that divides us in our movement. I think the size conversation, that's, as I mentioned earlier about DE, how we walk into that room and we're all equals. And I think it would be fascinating to throw is bad, to get a group of CEOs that don't know each other, credit union executives from all across the country, different sized credit unions that share a common trait in innovation. And I bet you'd be surprised. I bet that they wouldn't be able to say, oh, she runs a small shop or he runs a small shop or, ooh, she's got to be running a big one. I think it is about that thirst for innovation, change, and serving members that will continue to propel the credit union system and credit union movement, regardless of the size of the institution.
I hope you're right. And I love the
Me
idea,
too.
Quite honestly. To talk about leadership a little bit, how would you describe your leadership style and how would your team describe it?
Well, I would tell you that to a fault, I'm hands off. Now, I also would tell you that I'm approachable. And my door is, it's not open right now. So that would be a lie if I said to you, my door is always open, but it's not. But, for the most part, my door is open. I'm extremely responsive to my team. I think they would tell you that. I always want what is best for them. So if that means looking for a different job, if that means that we can't, I want to know about it so I can help them. So that's how I'm not sure if I'm describing a style or if I'm just sort of linking together a bunch of traits or maybe even anecdotes. My staff would also tell you, I have a saying that I think they could repeat. And that is, if it takes two of us to make a decision, we might be overstaffed. And I don't mean that in that we don't want to collaborate, because that's not the case. We have staff meetings frequently. And by the way, they hold staff meetings even when I'm not there and I don't lead them. We rotate around the staff. We take different months to lead them. I'm an equal when I walk in that door. And in fact, this month was my month to take notes and send them out to everyone. But I really believe that, folks are hired to do their job. And if we have given them the tools, the resource, and also the notion and the support that they're, what was Stuart Smalley saying? I'm smart, I'm beautiful, and darn it, people like me. But if people, we've helped them with their heart as well, and helped them to feel loved and engaged and supported, and, then let them do their job. That means that when people do come in and they do have a question for me, I am not making a decision about whether we're going to have chicken or beef at a meeting, right? I'm helping someone through a pretty tough conversation, a strategic conversation, and not an operational conversation. And a small organization like ours, we have 9 staff total. Every person does a different job. They all have to be the masters of their own universe. And I'm really blessed that I have the most talented staff, and they are. They can do their thing and then come together and have really interesting and engaging conversations, ask each other for assistance and new ways to think about. But in terms of doing their work, they just get her done.
So was that learned with experience, or were you always that way?
Oh, maybe experience. I think young Tracie, I'd like to tell you I'm young now, but I think young Tracie was far more controlling and hierarchical. I think that I had a different thought about power, in a sense that formal power was everything. I have come to recognize that informal power is so much more, excuse the term, powerful, and that if you have informal leaders who are not going your direction, you're never going to go anywhere. So that notion of getting everyone on the bus and getting them on the right seats. If you're only driving the bus because somebody handed you the key, you got problems. If you are driving the bus because every single person sitting on that bus believes you're the right person to drive the bus, then that's real leadership. So I think I have evolved and really come to understand that a servant's heart is, I don't want to get emotional, is more important than, dictator sort of. And, I do tease and I do like to tell them, hey, this is not a democracy. I just like you to believe it is. I just want to be a benevolent dictator. I do understand at the end of the day, the buck does stop here, and that I am the one, regardless of where the decision was made, because to use that 90s term, empowered by folks. If the decision was bad, I own that. I'm the one that's going to stand in front of a membership or the board and say, I made a bad decision. Here's what happened. Here's how we're going to rectify it. But I'm not sure that I always would have been that person. So I think that I have learned and continue to learn, I hope.
Has there been a piece of advice that you've carried with you over your career that you keep coming back to?
Wow. A piece of advice. I'm sure there have been many pieces of advice. I just found a card that Scott Earl wrote to me when I left Utah and came here. And one of the things that he wrote to me was essentially be yourself, be your true, authentic self. I don't know that he used those exact words, but that to me is what I have been seeking as a leader. And what I find, Randy, is that the closer I become to my true authentic self, the more successful that I am, the happier I am, the easier I am to be around. And so that probably is the best advice. Super simple in terms of the words, really hard to adhere to. We want to play roles. We want to look strong. I always want to look smarter than I am. I always want to be more articulate than I am. I always think, if I was only Gigi Highland, where the words could flow off my tongue and, I will have arrived. If I could be a Jill Tomlin and self-assured and standing in front of a group and really just having the ability to command that panel like she did last week at the GAC, I would have arrived. And at the end of the day, Randy, I'm Tracie Kenyon. This is who I am. And this is what I can try to emulate. I can try to take things from leaders that I have seen and work them in. But if that is not authentic to me, it just comes off looking weird.
Agree.
Right?
Yeah.
So I try to be me, and that's it.
That's all we can be. I think it's a beautiful thing to learn when we get to that point, or if we struggle with that. So you were speaking my language. When you run into a wall, come up against a problem, you just are having a hard time busting through. Do you have any hacks to help you get to the other side? Is there something you do to take a fresh look at it?
Well, one of the things that I do is I try to take a little time off, and that's hard for me because I tend to be a person who wants to just sort of plow through. I just want to start to finish, get her done. So when I come up against something like that, I step back. I have a few people in my life who think about things very differently than I do. And I have a few people in my life who are not involved in the credit union space. And sometimes I will run those kinds of, when I'm at that point, I will run those things by them. And it's always interesting to get a completely different perspective. And then I'm also blessed that my husband is a credit union CEO. So clearly not outside of the space, but he and I are extraordinarily different in our problem solving. And so I will say to him, what do you think about this? And Eddie has amazing instincts. And so he will say things to me that most of the time I'm like, huh? I didn't even think about that. And so I will use him as a sounding board, and I will use others. That's really at the end of the day. Now, to my credit union constituents, if they're listening, I don't run things that I shouldn't run by Eddie. I just want to make sure that people know that we have to keep there's always this distance between us. But I think what I do is I will ask folks for help, take some time, and then ask folks for help.
So last night, Jill jokingly said to me that since you brought up Eddie, that I should ask you who has the better credit union love story. So you and her, or me, or Eddie and me, or Tracie or Eddie. I mean, which one? Yeah. What was that? Oh, she also said Gigi and her husband. It could be in that mix too. So,
yes.
Right.
They definitely. Yep. They definitely are. Yep.
She's probably going to be like, I can't believe you asked her that. No. So I think you just, when you were talking about like how you take a different look at problems and reaching out to people, if you have a free day, it kind of goes into that same type of thing. Is there something, you have nothing on your calendar? I know that doesn't happen often. What outside passions do you have? What do you do to recharge?
What do I do? I love to spend time with my family. I love to spend time with my husband and my daughter. I also really enjoy spending time with my siblings, and they live out of state. So when I can get away and be with my siblings and my mom, Eddie will tell you that's the only time that I truly shut it off. Like I truly do not look at my devices when I am with them. And so spending time, I feel like I go about 90 miles an hour. Well, Eddie would tell you I have 2 speeds, on and off. So I'm going all the time. So honestly, when I have downtime, I might be cuddled up, reading a book next to a fire. My downtime is probably a little boring. We have a place in Arizona, and we like to go down there. I take walks. I cook. I just really am. I'm pretty low key. Now, I would also be lying to tell you that I don't love to shop. So, there is that. Shopping is for me a great release because it's, I'm bombarded by new things, and I get to touch things, and I get to look at things. I get to think about, would I like this? Would I not like that? But, my downtime is really that. It's pretty low key.
I understand.
Yeah.
Part 3. This to me is always the fun part. All right. So the rapid fire questions. The questions are rapid. Your answers do not have to be. So,
all right.
Do you remember the first time you got into memorable trouble?
Oh, you mean that wasn't with my parents? I remember the first time I got into memorable trouble at work.
Oh.
I had talked my first credit union into converting. I was a real estate loan manager at that time, and I had talked them into converting all of our real estate loans, about 30 million portfolio in the late 80s. It was quite a bit. From an online, it was on our core product, to an offline product, and sort of reworking them so they were all saleable on the secondary market. And I didn't balance.
There you go.
I didn't balance. I mean, that's at the end of the day, I didn't balance. So I'm moving $30 million worth of loans. And I believe we had to do it by hand. I mean, if I think back, and I remember sitting and having to tell the CEO that I didn't balance, that here I talked him into this and I didn't balance. And it was horrible. I really remember thinking, you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
This is it. You're done. And he was super gracious, gave me some ideas on how to go back and figure it out, what I should do. And after many days, I'm not even going to tell you, it was just hours. I mean, it was days of working and finding it. We eventually did balance. But I remember feeling, I remember just that feeling of knowing that it was all me. I mean, I did that. I couldn't blame anyone else. And so thankfully, my parents really always taught me and my siblings to take responsibility. And so I did. And I fully expected them to show me the door. But my guess is, in retrospect, they probably figured, oh, we can't show her the door because nobody else knows how to finish this project. Maybe they were going to let me finish and then show me the door. But they didn't. Yeah.
Do you have any routines that if you don't do, your day just feels off?
So brush my teeth, number one. So I that is the first thing I do, even before coffee. Is that gross? And then I know some people would say that's gross, but and then I check my email, and then I look at the news. So I check email, I check the news, and that is before anything else. And then, I have my typical morning routine that everyone has their own sort of thing. Yep. And included in that is I must make my bed. If the bed doesn't get made, my day's going to be off. So there you go.
That is something that I always used to do and then got away from and have just started doing again the past few weeks. I heard a podcast once, and I think it was a retired general or something of that nature, but he talked about the importance of making your bed because you feel like you have a win first thing every morning. It was like that, like you've got one thing done. It starts your day off right. I was like, that's kind of interesting. I love that. So the random question, what's the best album of all time? The one Tracie can listen to front to back.
The best album of all times is Laurie Anderson's Strange Angels. Are you familiar with Laurie Anderson?
I am not.
Most people will not be. She is a performance artist, and she's still performing, but a lot of her good stuff. Strange Angels is from the late 80s.
Okay.
My playlist has songs from, 70s, 80s, 90s, early on, and, this decade. But if I was going to take one album, the one, and listen over and over and over, front to back or whatever, I guess it's not front to back, but start to finish, because artists, in my mind, with an album, they have a specific thing in mind that they did. That's the genre, if you will, that they're exploring at the time. So that would be the album that
we will link to that. You may open a bunch of people's eyes to that. So
I know they may think, what a weirdo. I've always been more interested in things that are interesting than beautiful. And so she's very interesting, and her lyrics, little stream of consciousness, and it's cool.
I can't wait to listen. And
all right.
I am completely clueless on this one. So another one of these scratch my own itch type questions. I'm a reader. We have a stack of books. Is there a book that you have either recommended or bought for other people over time?
You know what, Randy, right on my desk is The Tipping Point. I'm going to give it to a staff member today. Last week at the GAC, we got to see Malcolm Gladwell. It's the second time I've had an opportunity to hear him live. I have a little bit of a celebrity crush. I'm not really, I'm not one of those people. I guess I have two celebrity crushes. One is Bobby Flay, the chef, and the other one is Malcolm Gladwell. And so he's that guy. So I'm handing that off to a staffer today.
That's a fantastic book. We will link to it for sure. Woo-hoo. You didn't add to my pile. Yeah. Oh no. It's one of my favorites. We actually have talked about that with a ton of people, especially knowing that when he was going to be at GAC this year, I'm like, have you guys read this?
Yeah, it's awesome.
As you've gotten older, is there something that's become more important to you, and has anything become less important?
Even though I just talked about shopping, I would tell you stuff has become a lot less important. Things that have become much more important to me are sustainable relationships. So my relationship with my husband is extraordinarily important to me. My relationship with my daughter is paramount. My relationship with my siblings and friends, and my relationship with my colleagues here at the office, and also my credit union constituents, that has become far more important to me than stuff. If you will. Yeah.
I get it. There's a question I don't send. And who is the first person you think of when you hear the word success?
Oh, my mom. And my mom, not because, I don't know, now that I say that, I might start getting emotional. Oh,
just to let you know, that is the favorite answer of the podcast.
Okay. All right. Good.
Mom gets the most answers on that. So why your mom?
So my mom is, I'm blessed. She's still alive. She just had her 81st birthday. My mom went to college right out of high school and then met my dad and got married. She'd done 2 years of school and had 4 girls and went back to college. Actually, in her early 40s, she wanted to learn how to fly planes. So she became a pilot, and she really wanted to fly helicopters, and that just didn't happen. But that was her goal. I remember as a child, my mom always going to college. Even if she was taking a solar energy class, she was taking a class. She's a lifelong learner. And at age 48, she went back to college. She graduated, and she taught school. So it was,
that's beautiful.
Yeah, sorry.
I love it.
But she's a really, really interesting person. One other story about my mom that I think I can tell without getting emotional. So I took her to the GAC probably 12 years ago, maybe 13 years ago, and she came with us to our on our Hill visits, and she was just going to sit in the lobby of our congressman's office. And the congressman said, no, come in, Mom. He was being a little condescending, but it was, but it's come in, Mom. And, you can sit in my chair. So he stood in front of his desk and, sort of held court, and we did our thing. And then he turned to my mom and he said, well, Mom, do you have anything to add? And without missing a beat, my mom said, she sort of leans forward and she says, well, all of this conversation reminds me of when I was on the HUD housing board. And she goes off, and I was like, I'd totally forgotten that my mom was on the HUD housing board when I was a kid. So my mom was always, politically engaged, politically active, engaged in her community. And even for the things that I didn't see, she was just always trying to make a difference. And, she's still doing it. She still drives for Meals on Wheels. She's 81 years old. She told me once, she said, I never needed a housekeeper until I retired. I'm so busy. So, she just is, she's still going, still active in her church, in her community. And, she's an inspiration.
I can see why. That's a fantastic story there. Again, thank you so much for being on the show. I think that's always the perfect way to wrap up. The last question I have for you, do you have any asks of our audience or final thoughts?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say, go to DE. If you haven't been through DE, it's a wonderful opportunity for you to really get a strong sense of credit unions, and then also love and support the system. Credit unions are such a unique service provider, and we have so much good to do. So that's my ask. Just love each other and be good.
We will link to DE and everything else we talked about in the show notes. And I know from talking to Chad a few weeks ago, most of the classes this year are filling up. So people should sign up now or do it next year. Thank you again so much, Tracie, for being on the show. I've enjoyed this. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. It's been my pleasure. I appreciate it too.
Thank you. And we hope all of the listeners have an amazing day. Enjoy.